There is a recording. Most people who find it stop listening after the first few minutes, not because it becomes disturbing immediately, but because something about it feels wrong in a way that is difficult to explain afterward. A pressure, a feeling. Like standing alone in a dark room and suddenly realizing there is another person inside with you. The recording was recovered from the research vessel RV Hadal Meridian in November of 2019. The ship was found drifting roughly 340 nautical miles southwest of the Azores. Engines dead. Exterior lights still active. No crew aboard. No visible damage. No distress signal. The interior was dry. The tables were organized. Coffee mugs still sat beside active monitors. One meal had been left half, finished in the galley as if someone intended to return in a few minutes. But nobody ever did. There were only the footprints, wet barefoot footprints, leading from the lower engine corridor toward the bridge. The prints never came back down. The official investigation concluded the crew had likely abandoned ship during extreme weather conditions. But there was no storm recorded anywhere near the vessel that night. The Atlantic had been completely calm. This is what the recording shows. The RV Hadal Meridian left port on October 31st, 2019. 6 people were aboard. Dr. Mara Sols, expedition lead and marine geophysicist. Thomas Ferreira, sonar and ROV technician. Dr. Kenji Watanabe, oceanographer. Yara Linkuvist, marine biologist. Callum Price, chief engineer. And Dr. Priya Nath, acoustic physicist. The mission itself seemed simple. 3 months earlier, Mara had discovered an unusual sonar formation buried nearly 200 meters beneath the Atlantic Ocean. At first, researchers believed it was geological, possibly volcanic. But higher resolution scans revealed something impossible. The structure had symmetry, direction, shape. It looked constructed, not naturally formed. And according to the sonar data, the object stretched across the seabed for nearly 2 kilometers. Nobody on board said it out loud during the early days of the expedition, but everyone who looked at the scans quietly arrived at the same conclusion. It looked artificial. The first few days aboard the Hadal Meridian felt normal. The recording shows ordinary things. People making coffee, arguments about data calibration, half-finished conversations in narrow corridors, Kenji joking constantly about retirement, Yara writing inside her journal late at night while listening to music through one earbud. The kind of small human details that make everything afterward feel worse. Because when people vanish mysteriously, the mind expects them to behave differently beforehand. More dramatic, more frightened. But they didn't. They acted normal, at least initially. The signal appeared during the second night. Priya discovered it around 3 a.m. while reviewing passive hydrophone recordings inside the acoustic monitoring room. At first glance, it looked insignificant. A narrow repeating pulse buried beneath normal Atlantic noise. But after isolating the waveform, Priya realized something deeply unusual about it. The signal repeated every 17 seconds. Perfectly. No drift. No fluctuation. No natural irregularity. Every interval matched almost exactly. Natural systems don't behave like that. Not oceans. Not geology. Not biology. Nature breathes. This didn't. The signal originated directly beneath the vessel, exactly where the structure rested on the seabed. Priya replayed the recording for almost 40 minutes without speaking. Later, she would describe the experience in her private notes using a sentence investigators never fully understood. It felt like listening to something trying to become language. The next morning, the Atlantic Ocean went silent. not metaphorically, literally. The hydrophone system stopped detecting normal oceanic activity entirely. No distant ship engines, no whale calls, no tectonic movement, no thermal layer disturbances, nothing. The entire Atlantic beneath the vessel became acoustically empty. When Priya and Toms reviewed older recordings to locate the transition point, they found something even stranger. The ocean noise did not gradually fade. It simply stopped. Instantly. Like someone muting a television. The timestamp of the transition occurred at exactly 3:17 a.m. The same approximate time Priya had stopped listening to the signal the night before. Nobody aboard the ship reacted dramatically at first. That was part of what made the recording unsettling. The fear arrived slowly, quietly, like cold entering a room. People became distracted. Sleep patterns deteriorated. Crew members forgot conversations they had only hours earlier. Small arguments started over meaningless things. The atmosphere aboard the ship changed in subtle ways difficult to describe. The corridors seemed darker. The ship itself felt quieter. Even the ocean outside appeared wrong somehow. Too still. On the fourth day, they deployed the ROV. The descent took 90 minutes. Most of the crew gathered silently around the monitors, while the vehicle dropped deeper through the Atlantic darkness. At first, the footage showed nothing except drifting marine snow, illuminated by artificial lights. Then the structure appeared. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The thing beneath the ocean floor was enormous, dark, angular. Its surface contained repeating lines and enormous seam, like formations running across it in geometric patterns. Not rock, not coral, not anything naturally occurring. It looked manufactured. At one point, Thomas zoomed the camera closer toward the structure's surface. The seams looked almost identical to hull plating, like the outer shell of something impossibly large buried beneath the seabed. Then one of the lower cameras detected movement nearby. A shape standing at the edge of the light, human-shaped, motionless, watching the ROV. Nobody aboard the Hadal Meridian moved. The figure stood upright nearly 200 meters below sea level without any visible equipment or lighting. No suit, no tether. Nothing. The camera remained fixed on the figure for 11 seconds. Then it disappeared. Not swimming away, not moving, simply gone. The water where it stood became empty again. That night, Callum reported hearing voices inside the engine corridor. At first, he assumed several crew members were talking nearby. But when he followed the sound, the hallway was empty. The voices continued anyway. And he recognized them. Mara, Tom's, Priya. They sounded calm, focused, as if discussing something important. But the conversation itself made no sense. The voices were talking about events that had not happened yet. A missing crew member. Something beneath the ship. A decision nobody had made. Callum later admitted the detail that frightened him most was not hearing voices in an empty corridor. It was hearing future conversations spoken in familiar voices. By day 6, the footprints appeared. Wet barefoot footprints leading upward from the engine corridor toward the bridge. The prints appeared between security camera frames. One hallway would appear empty. Then seconds later, the footprints would simply be there. Fresh, dripping seawater. No cameras ever captured anyone creating them. The crew began sleeping less. Nobody wanted to move through the ship alone anymore. People stopped joking. Even meals became quiet. The recording captures several moments where nobody speaks for nearly entire minutes at a time. Only the sound of the ship creaking softly against the Atlantic. And beneath it all, the pulse, every 17 seconds. On the 8th day, Mara found Priya standing alone at the front railing before sunrise. The ocean around the vessel had become completely flat. No wind, no waves. The Atlantic looked frozen beneath the gray morning sky. Priya barely reacted when Mara approached her. She simply stared into the water. Later, Mara would describe the moment this way. It looked like she was listening to someone standing below the ship. Priya eventually explained that the signal had changed. Not the sound itself, the interval. The 17-second timing had slowly accelerated overnight before transforming into something closer to a tone. And according to Priya, the tone used patterns taken directly from her own previous acoustic research recordings. It learned how to speak in my language first. That was the sentence she used. By day 10, the structure beneath the Atlantic had started moving upward. At first, the change was small, only a few meters, but the ascent accelerated rapidly. The object was rising toward the surface. Every sonar sweep confirmed it. Nobody aboard the Hadal Meridian could explain how something that size could move through the seabed silently. But it was moving, and it was getting closer. Then came the figure in the water. Callum saw it first, just after dawn on day 11. A human silhouette floating roughly 40 meters from the vessel. Perfectly still, facing the ship. At first they believed it was a survivor from another vessel, until Yara quietly recognized the jacket, orange, reflective strip across the shoulder. It belonged to Priya. The problem was, Priya was still aboard the ship, standing inside the acoustic room, alive. When the crew launched a rescue inflatable and approached the figure, it disappeared beneath the surface without creating a ripple. No splash, no struggle, nothing. By this point, nobody aboard the Hadal Meridian trusted their own perception anymore. People began hearing conversations before they occurred. Several crew members claimed they remembered events that had not happened yet. Yara stopped writing observations in her journal and started writing questions instead. Kenji repeatedly asked what day it was despite checking the date himself only minutes earlier. And Priya spent nearly all of her time inside the acoustic room listening to the signal through headphones. Then the recording appeared. A 16-minute audio file automatically generated overnight by the ship's monitoring systems. The file contained clear conversations between all 6 crew members. Except the conversation had never happened. The voices discussed future events, things nobody aboard had experienced yet. And one sentence appeared repeatedly throughout the recording. It is already awake. That same night, the signal changed again. Priya finally understood what the 17-second interval represented. It wasn't random. It wasn't mechanical. It was biological. The pulse matched the duration of a human heartbeat cycle under extreme stress after adjusting for oceanic propagation delay. The signal beneath the Atlantic was not broadcasting language. It was imitating life. The next morning, the ocean itself began changing. The water surrounding the Hadal Meridian darkened unnaturally. Then, the surface started sinking inward slightly around the vessel. Not violently. Not like a whirlpool. More like the Atlantic itself was breathing downward. At 7:14 a.m. on the 14th day, the signal stopped completely. For the first time since the expedition began silence. Then something rose beneath the water. The camera footage becomes unstable at this point. Crew members can be heard speaking softly off-screen. Nobody sounds panicked, which somehow makes the recording worse. because the voices sound like people witnessing something too enormous for fear to process correctly. The structure emerged slowly. Dark, impossible, stretching outward beyond the visible horizon. Rows of massive seam-like formations became visible across its surface. And according to the final surviving bridge audio, something opened on it. Priya approached the exterior bridge door shortly afterward. Before opening it, she turned toward Mara and said, "It just wanted to be heard." Those were the final clearly understandable words recovered from the vessel. The recording ends 23 minutes later. The Hadal Meridian was discovered drifting 3 days afterward, empty, still illuminated, still intact. No bodies were ever found. But investigators discovered seawater throughout multiple interior corridors and wet barefoot footprints leading upward toward the deck. None of them returned. The final acoustic analysis performed on the recovered recording revealed one last detail investigators never released publicly. Beneath the identifiable crew voices, there was another conversation hidden at lower frequencies. A second set of voices, extremely distorted, almost impossible to isolate. But according to the forensic analysts assigned to the case, the hidden conversation appeared to be running backward, not reversed audio. Backward events. The speakers discussed things before they happened. The final thing mentioned in the hidden recording was the departure of the Hadal Meridian from port. The first thing discussed was something the analyst claimed she had no words capable of describing. The official investigation closed 8 months later. No explanation was ever given publicly. But even now, according to deep water monitoring stations near the Azores, an unidentified repeating pulse can still occasionally be detected beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Every 17 seconds. Always from the same depth. Always from the same location. Waiting for someone to listen long enough to understand it.